Stunning revelation has raised fresh questions about the invisible battle behind the Iran-Israel-US conflict. A report claims that the United States stepped in to stop an alleged Israeli assassination plot targeting two of Iran's top negotiators, and the concern was that if the negotiators were eliminated, the fragile diplomatic process could collapse and the Gulf could once again slide towards a wider war. And these were not ordinary political figures. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf were leading Iran's diplomatic outreach with the regional powers and the United States. And their discussions focused on opening the Strait of Hormuz, reducing tensions, and creating a framework for future nuclear negotiations. And Washington reportedly believed that eliminating them would destroy any chance of diplomacy or even peace returning to West Asia. And according to multiple reports, Israel's broader military strategy has included targeting Iran's senior leadership throughout the conflict, and reports suggest that Araghchi and Ghalibaf were at different points placed on an Israeli target list before the US urged restraint. And the bigger question now is whether military objectives and diplomatic priorities were pulling in completely different directions, and the negotiations themselves reportedly unfolded under extraordinary security. Iranian officials are said to have sought assurances through Pakistani and Qatari intermediaries before traveling for their talks, and Pakistani fighter jets reportedly even escorted the Iranian delegation, while one return journey allegedly ended with an emergency diversion following a security threat. So connecting all these dots, the episode highlights how high the stakes were behind the closed doors. And to help us really know what went down, we have Professor Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics, live from Dublin, and Ambassador Bhaspati Mukherjee, former Indian diplomat. Thank you, ma'am, for taking your time out. Professor Scott Lucas, do you think that this report suggesting that US thwarted a major assassination plot of Israel on Iranian negotiators clearly goes on to show that, the talks and US and Israel were not really on the same page when the talks were happening?
Well, I think it continues a story that we actually knew part of back at the start of April, just before we got the ceasefire. And U.S. officials or Israeli officials, someone let it be known that Washington went to the Netanyahu government and said, take the two men that you've mentioned, the Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and the Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher, take them off your kill list. So apparently they were on a kill list, but the Americans, these were the guys they were negotiating with to try to get the ceasefire. Now, why this story has now resurfaced only 3 months later? Is it because there were people in Washington worried that the Israelis, in fact, will defy the U.S. and target Ghalibaf and target Araghchi? Would it simply be the Americans leaking this to restate the line, which is do not put them in your kill list? Or could it have been triggered by a statement which was made this week by the Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, who said, we're ready to go and kill, the supreme leader, the new supreme leader, Supreme Leader Khamenei, in effect saying it's open season again for targeted assassinations. So I can't give you the specific reason why the story has revived, but no, it is a revival of the idea that the Americans have drawn a line with the Israelis. There are certain Iranian figures you can't touch because otherwise we won't get a deal to end the war.
Ambassador, what do you think was really Israelis' target? Because, this is a high-stakes diplomatic engagement that was supposed to happen. And, this assassination plot, what do you think that Israel was really targeting? Was it the, two high-profile gentlemen, or was it the deal itself?
I think it was the deal itself, frankly, because they don't want a deal. And Trump is the first US president who's allowed himself to be led by the Israeli leadership into a conflict which does not really suit American national interests. And I would say, first of all, there are two very troubling issues which arise, which my co-panelists will also appreciate, which is that targeted external assassination is a complete violation of international law ever since the World War II and the UN was set up. Here we seem to be in a situation where we are condoning as a world globally, or if not condoning, not talking too much about targeted external assassination. This is also extremely embarrassing for India, which has very close ties with Israel. That's my first point. Secondly, are we in a situation where we are discovering that the Trump administration does not have full control over Israel's decisions on these matters? Earlier, it was very clear that the Americans had complete control, and whatever Israel would do, they would do only after America nodded. They would not do it without the American nod. Are we in a situation where the Israelis have become emboldened to take independent steps, for instance, to eliminate moderate negotiators so that is Iran falls back into a very, very hardline kind of leadership, which would drag the region into a wider war and maybe, God forbid, into a war which would go outside the region. And none of us are very far from the region, including India. So it's a very scary thought that the Americans, if they had to go to this extent to make it public, it must have been A, to warn the Iranians, which they must have also done privately, but also to make it very clear to the Israelis, hang on, these two guys are not to be eliminated. But now I wait for a time when the United Nations and global leadership says that targeted external assassinations went out with World War II. We cannot bring them back in 2026. If we make that an instrument of foreign policy or state policy of any nation, big or small, it will inexorably drag the world closer to a catastrophic, larger conflict, which one would not know the outcome of, given the fact that it is not clear whether Israel has nuclear weapons, Iran has nuclear weapons. Are they in a position to be used? In other words, are they mated? Are they ready for takeoff? The nuclear weapons, etc. These are things which, if you leave in one split second, the world can go on this side or the other. It's a very, very scary scenario. If the Americans have stopped this targeted assassination, I think the whole world would like to thank them for it. But it's a pity that they didn't stop the Iranian leadership earlier, who wiped out. He was an 85-year-old man who was in terminal stage of prostate cancer. He
That's
just
right.
had a few months to go. That he should have had the right to go in a dignified manner at the right time without such a horrifying end to him and his family. The funeral is coming up in a couple of days. Sir.
Right. Professor Lucas, do you think that, this assassination plot was one of the clearest signals that Israel probably wanted desperately a regime change in Iran?
Oh, it's quite clear that Israel was going for regime change. It's not just the fact that, as the ambassador pointed out, you had the targeted assassinations on day one of the war. And let's be clear, that was U.S. intelligence that was fed to the Israelis that they acted upon. So the U.S. was involved in those assassinations. The Israelis pushed the United States into the war, scrapping talks by telling them, if you assassinate the leadership, the Iranian people will rise up, will arm Iranian Kurds in Iraq will come across. That's it. The regime will be toppled. Now, none of that came about, which is partly why we're in the difficulty we're in now, where we're in a limbo with these talks that really aren't going anywhere at the moment. But let's put this in a wider context, because I fully agree with the ambassador that we need international law to be upheld. We need an international effort to do this because a number of countries have carried out targeted assassinations over the years, but Israel in particular has. These are not the first targeted assassinations. Israel targeted Hamas leaders in other countries, including during the Gaza war when they killed Hamas's political leader, Ismail Haniyeh. They have targeted Hezbollah leaders both in
The pager
Lebanon
attack.
and then in other areas. Yep, yeah. In other words, this is an instrument of Israeli foreign policy. Whatever you think about Israel policies and Israel-Iran relations, we can talk about those political points of view. But in terms of the method being used, the Israelis have always defied international law by using targeted assassination against their perceived enemies in Lebanon, in Palestine, in Iran, and beyond.
Ambassador, more than saving the negotiators of Iran, I think what US did was save its own credibility, because there was a lot of build up that Donald Trump was giving on social media, and then suddenly there's an assassination plot that US came across. And then just to save its credibility, do you think that the assassination plot was thwarted?
But naturally, it's a question of credibility. Also, a question of the reputation of United States, who built the multilateral system post World War II. It's an American-built institution, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was drafted by the then First Lady. I mean, for United States to turn its back on multilateralism, for United States to encourage targeted external assassination, gives a signal, wrong signal to other countries who are waiting for this. So they would say, well, if US can do this, so can we. Then you would be in a situation where, I don't want to name the countries concerned, but they can use the same policy of targeted external assassination, which would raise, in fact, the security fears for our political leaders, even in India and elsewhere, that anybody, any powerful political leader is now fair game for targeted external assassination, since it is not frowned upon by the leader of the free world, which is the United States of America. So I think that from that perspective too, it was good they stopped it, because Araghchi is very suave, he has good contacts, he is a moderate, and if you look at who's left, let's say these two poor gentlemen were eliminated, it would come back to the very, very hardline leadership who would like to drag this war on till the end of Trump's tenure, so as to ensure that not just Trump and his MAGA base are finished, but that a different political party would gain power in Washington, a party with whom they've had much less problems with, because they have been much less hardline with Iran. So I think all in all, we've had a narrow escape. And as we speak, I hope something doesn't go wrong, that we wake up tomorrow morning and find that one of them or both of them have been assassinated. Because anything can happen in such an unstable situation of flux. And let me tell you one thing, Deepak, that the message has gone through globally. People are securing their leaders because they realize that the old order is gone. As Antonio Gramsci said when he was in Mussolini's prison cell, the old order is dead. The new order is yet to be born. This is the time when you see monsters. I agree with him. I agree with Gramsci, totally. And this is the time when there is global disorder and no new order, when strange things can happen. And one of the strange things happening, which we need to prevent, is targeted external assassination, particularly of political leadership of other countries. No one has the right to do that, either in our country or in another country, and this is something that needs to be stopped. Moreover, again, from India's perspective, from our foreign policy and security perspective, we are indebted to Israel for so many things. We have a very, very close relationship, and there has never been any anti-Semitism in India since millennia. Jews have come to India thousands of years ago and settled down. Some went to Israel and came back to Kerala saying they prefer being in Kerala. It's a much nicer place to be in. So where does it put India's foreign policy? We also have a very close civilizational policy with Iran. So this kind of situation actually puts us also, like many other countries, in a dilemma, because we cannot condone targeted external assassination.
It's almost like a it's almost like a free for all, Ambassador. And Professor Lucas, the old order has collapsed. The new order is yet to be written. But in the interim, to avoid such unilateral actions that we've seen, be it Venezuela or even Iran, what's the way forward? Because international law, nobody really is paying heed to it. So what's really is the need of the hour?
Well, at the very least, you still need to act through international organizations to say that this is not acceptable, even if you don't have the enforcement to prevent it happening. So as a quick reminder, we do have an international criminal court and an international court of justice. And we do have cases before those courts which relate to the Israel operations in Gaza in recent years, as well as, I should mention also, war crimes cases against Hamas. Those cases need to proceed. In terms of the Security Council, you all will have discussed this before. The Security Council almost inevitably will deadlock over this issue because the United States will protect Israel against any Security Council resolution. But you still need to proceed, for example, through the General Assembly to at least put a resolution down which says that this is not acceptable. You need to work through international or regional organizations, and India has a great deal of weight in regional organizations to express that this is not acceptable. And then you effectively have to pursue to remove the causes of this. You have to encourage I hate the word de-escalation, because what you effectively are saying is you need to once and for all move away from the use of violence to try to achieve political objectives. There are alternatives that need to be pursued. And at this moment, and the Trump administration are not in these talks with Iran because they're feeling kind towards Iran. They're there because they are in a difficult position. But we need to encourage those talks to get to a resolution over the Strait of Hormuz, over the regional global economy, and to get a lasting ceasefire, and to make sure, by the way, that Israel doesn't have the pretext to continue these assassinations through its operations in southern Lebanon.
Right, Professor, it was a riveting conversation with you, with some valuable insights on what really is happening in West Asia. Thank you for joining me